Welcome back. This is the return of ASMR Diesel, and this is the Then and Now podcast. Today with me, I have the usual co-host, Professor E, King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy, and Lelouch V. How you guys doing, brothers?
Hello, hello.
And today we are here for another point of interest video, and today's topic is that of Chekhov's gun. Residential writing savant, Professor E, could you please, for the audience, give them a summary of what Chekhov's gun is?
Sure. Basically, what it boils down to is a Chekhov's gun is a narrative principle that states that every element in a story must be necessary. Anything that you introduce in some capacity in the first act should become utilized by the second or third act. The most basic literal example of it is this. If the three of us were sitting down here in Act 1 and there was an actual gun on the table that the audience saw, one of us should be using that gun by the end of that act or by the end of that film. And it's meant to be, it comes into play a lot when you deal with plants and payoffs. Something that I've talked to y'all countless times about before, but it means that you shouldn't ever set up something or tee up something and not have it pay off in some capacity.
Cough, puff, quantumania.
Okay, right.
Okay, we're back into that then. The question I have on this is to kind of give you a little bit more clarification in the medium of film. Obviously, in a lot of movies there are a lot of different background things. If there's like a trap house or something in the movie, there's gonna be a lot of guns everywhere. How and in which do you know? Because I don't know if you said that it meant that metaphorically, as far as there being a little gun on the table. But how do you know which thing to focus on? Is it need to be a complete camera pan to that item, or do they need to mention this thing?
Yeah, it's pretty much any, like if you get a camera pan on the item, if you have a direct mention of a item, or if it is displayed in some way, shape, or form, it has to be used at some point in that. If it doesn't, it's a wasted effort.
And it can be even very subtle too. If they're going out of their way, the director, the cinematographer, what have you, is going out of their way to show you something in the scene, then it has to be used in some capacity later. However, you can be more subtle about things. You can have it where it's literally a gun or a sword is on the wall, mounted on the wall, and then later on, swing away for signs with Joaquin Phoenix. The bat is on the wall. And you see it in the background. They don't really highlight it that much, but it's clearly there. Later on, it's used. Or Shaun of the Dead. They're at the bar called the Winchester. A Winchester rifle is hanging up there later on. Otis knows this. They literally, I think they even make a mention of that idea, but they go to grab that Winchester rifle, cock it, and shoot people in the head. So it can be very subtle or very deliberate. Now there are times where you have a different type of Chekhov's gun, and if I'm sure y'all have seen Jurassic Park 2. What's it called? The Lost World? Is that what it's called, Otis?
You know what Chris Pratt ones?
No, dear God, no.
The one before that. Back in the day, I think it's from 1995 or 96, where it has Jeff Goldblum. It's Lost World. Okay. Yeah. It's Lost World. So Jeff Goldblum's daughter is a gymnast, and they make mention of that, and they mention the fact that she was like a hopeful for the gymnastics team, and it seems random and weird as hell. But then later on in the third act, of course, she uses gymnastics to take out a raptor. So it's kind of like it was the setup. Or the gun was her having gymnastic ability, and the payoff was her taking down a raptor by doing a weird bunch of gymnastics. So
even the title could be Chekhov's gun, or like if it says something specifically in the title, and you're just waiting the whole movie for that to happen. Yeah, there it goes. Even non-verbally for the MCU, in that Captain Marvel movie that everybody hates. Everyone waiting for Samuel Jackson's eye to get scratched in the end. Well, just seeing how he got he lost his eye. That's a Chekhov's gun. So I mean,
So a question I have on that topic then is a Chekhov's gun. Is it possible for the Chekhov gun initially to be set up not be known by the audience? Could it be something that was subtly placed that was not focused on and then brought back around? Something akin to like a Saw movie. How like in those movies usually there's like a subtle article or a picture, something that's in a background somewhere, and you don't really give it a lot of attention to it, and the director kind of misleads the audience to not pay attention to that thing, and then later on you see that thing was important the whole time.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned Saw. Oftentimes plenty of detective mysteries or whatnot would do this type of thing. Agatha Christie was notorious for having so many red herrings, you weren't sure which red herring, which idea to follow as being the real thing. Rian Johnson recently did it with his movies with Glass Onion or Knives Out. So yeah, they will have them, but they have to be present enough that you, if you are paying attention, you could catch on to it. It can't be completely. The whole idea is plants and payoffs. If you just pay off nothing that wasn't, if you just pay off something that wasn't set up, it makes no sense. You can't say, and the guilty person was Bill Simpson. It's like, who the fuck is Bill Simpson? You have to have shown Bill Simpson at one time or another for it to make sense. He doesn't have a whole big introduction, but he has to have been there before for us to know he made matters. So,
Right.
Question: How? Go ahead. My bad.
I was going to say, like, it doesn't have to be like an immediate setup and payoff. Like, have you guys seen Death Note, the anime Death Note?
Yeah, at least up until L dies, at least.
spoiler, whatever.
Spoiler alert.
Man, that shit's been out for. You know my rule. The thing's been out for years now. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. So, in the first episode, Ryuk tells Light that, if you're gonna die, it's gonna be me that kills you. And that's exactly how that winds up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. He brings it up again at the very end of it. Because the thing is, it's different because it's a manga and also a anime series. It's like 57 episodes of anime, so it's a long term. But it's set up at the very beginning of that first episode. He says that to him. So yeah, but it still holds up. It still holds water. And you can do that with series too. You can do that kind of thing as far as it's fun when you have a character or a hero going like to Dragon Ball Z, for example. The idea of the senzu beans. Oftentimes it'll happen where Goku will be throwing a senzu beans to here. Use this if you need it. It's like, okay, cool. And 12 episodes later in a fight, he throws it to somebody else and that saves their life or whatnot. So it's kind of, it can be.
Or he gets a spell.
Yeah, with cell, obviously. But you can use these kind of things all the time in storytelling, either whether it's long form or short form. Yeah.
That being said, we obviously, from previous conversations on narrative, know that too many setups can be an issue. How many would you say there's a particular number personally that you would tend to stick by when it comes to Chekhov guns?
Oh, as far as not having so many things that confuses the audience?
Or as far as just having a certain amount of setups? Obviously, we know there's some movies that have a million quick hitter setups and some have like one overarching one. Mm-hmm. Do you have a personal, I guess, preference on how many you have in your stories?
So for me, it's not necessarily a number. It's just how many that you can resolve within your story and for it to still make sense cohesively. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, if you have a 1 hour show, don't do 50 setups. Like,
that makes no sense.
But I mean, if you got a 100 episode show, then absolutely do 50 setups. I mean, it just really depends on what the medium is, what type of story you're trying to build. I mean, at the end of the day, it's nuance. You have to have a understanding for what you can do within that time frame.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. And there's certain movies where they're trying to deliberately do more things. One of our co-host, Charlie, aka C Diesel, is a big fan of the movie Bullet Train. Bullet Train has lots of setups, and essentially it pays them off. That's part of the whole second half of the film is essentially paying off all these things they set up in some capacity. However, the actual big, if you had to boil it down what the single biggest Chekhov's gun in Bullet Train is probably
the identity of the White Tiger.
Yeah, who's the White Tiger? They built him up a lot.
Something, I forgot what it was. I don't think it was the White Tiger.
Yeah, everything kind of seems to center around him in some capacity as far as who he is. You don't see his face. So paying off that with spoiler alert, the person who actually that's probably the biggest Chekhov's gun. But there's several other things too, as far as who is Brad Pitt talking to on the phone. The idea of the assassin in the suit that killed the guy at his wedding in Mexico. All these different things. All these things that do have smoking guns or Chekhov's guns for them, but they are paid off throughout the film. And then the biggest thing later on is, of course, the reveal of the White Tiger.
So that being said, I'd also like to lean down the path of discussing. Oh God, my bad. Swallowed down the wrong pipe. Jesus Christ!
I can tell.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Where the fuck was I? I just lost my train of thought. I almost died.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, guys, Chekhov's. That threw off my entire.
That was a perfect example of what of going awry. Is if you basically have Charlie's like, yo, man, I have something big to tell you, something huge, man. It's monumental. It's the biggest question of all time. And then that's it. There's credits. There's no ending. People are left wanting more. So that's a horrible example of a Chekhov's gun where they're going awry, where it doesn't actually.
What I was gonna say was I was gonna give one of my more favorite recent examples of them, or at least a show that utilizes those very well. That being the recent House of the Dragon series that recently debuted. The interesting thing there is that they, to me, use Chekhov guns as more like of a concept in a sense, like patriarchy, motherhood, things like that. It's something they kind of set up with. It's like an overarching theme that they set up in the very first episode, and something that's kind of repeated with different characters, and you kind of see that resolved throughout the entire season, even down to not the final episode, but the last few episodes. With the recurring theme of a mother sacrificing herself for her child and things of that nature. With I'm not gonna spoil that too much because that is fairly recent. So I won't spoil that, but
I know
you catch my drift. You catch my drift on that one. Like Chekhov's guns can be overarching themes and not just a singular item.
I think those are two different things actually. I think like a reoccurring theme and a Chekhov's like a Chekhov's gun is like a tangible thing there. Right, like it's a moment that they set up. It's a character that they show. It is an item that they present. It is a tangible thing that you can see at the time within the movie. It's not a reoccurring thing, because the reoccurring thing
that's his own thing.
It's a bigger concept.
Yeah,
So that being said, you're saying you tell me you can't have a repeated Chekhov's gun. Once you use that one repeated one, it has to be the end of that thing.
Typically, yeah, it's a little like but if you get into semantics of things, the gun is meant to be more of a literal sense as far as this idea or this object is specifically introduced here in the first act, and it's going to be paid off once in the third act, or it's introduced in this episode. It'll be paid off later on in this other episode. I won't get into spoilers for House of the Dragon, but since you brought that up, there's a part where a massive dragon is introduced in episode 5 or 6. I can't remember which. It's this huge dragon is introduced, and the character ends up with this dragon, and you don't really see it do too much with the dragon just too early on. Then in the finale, it does do something with that dragon. It's like, oh, okay, you could say that was kind of a big plan and payoff there as far as seeing a massive powerhouse beast go beast mode. You could. I don't know if
because even in that same token though, with that same particular dragon, it was when shown multiple times throughout the series, and it was part of the plot in a significant way. Maybe not significant, but in a big way for something that changed the plot going forward with a particular character.
Yes, and it was
like used multiple
part
times.
of the theme. It was part of the theme. So it can get a little murky sometimes with how far you want things to go, especially if you're dealing with long form storytelling with multiple episodes. But typically, like Otis said, it's meant to be a very specific object seen once, paid off once. That's the idea behind it. Usually,
one-hitter quitter. Okay.
Yeah, usually.
Like,
usually.
A famous example of a bad Chekhov's, well, not a bad, it's an underwhelming Chekhov's gun. It's the first episode of Game of Thrones. The first episode is called Winter is Coming. And then, of course, around in season 8, and the Night King shows up and he's done in an episode. Like how one episode, you built that. The first episode, you say Winter is Coming, and you kill the Night King in one episode. Like that's almost as bad as Madara getting body snatched.
We knew
so at that point
we're
debating the quality of a Chekhov's gun then, because like you said, it fits the purpose of it. Set up this thing. Winter came. It just didn't stay as long as people would have liked.
Or it took longer to get there.
Right. Yeah. So then that's where I'm getting into something as far as like a repeating thing or repeating theme. Because let's say they show though, almost at the Snow King. Jesus Christ. The Night King.
It's, you know what you mean. Yeah.
Right. Like, because I'd assume that they, at the end of the House of the Dragon series, they may like do like a because I don't know I feel like that'd be a good way to redeem the series in a sense, to kind of show a preview of them to an extent at the end of the House of Dragon series, or however long the show runs
Night
for.
King doesn't come around until I think like 60 years after where this series starts.
So he's
'Cause I think
created.
it's like,
So he's. I assumed he was like a
he's-
primordial being that was around a lot of time.
Person.
no,
so
he was a person.
He's a person.
That was basically corrupted by some of the magic from the what are those creatures called?
He was tied up next to a tree or something. They put a jewel. Yeah, we saw how he got
Yeah.
made. Yeah.
Which I'd see them at least going down the route of having a previous Night King to some extent, because they already, again, they showed the Chekhov's gun as far as the beginning of that series, telling the prophecy to showing that prophecy was a significant thing being passed down from ruler to ruler. So I mean, maybe it's a callback to the original series, but I don't see them focusing so hard on that and the mistranslation of that in the plot without doing something with it.
Maybe not, and you could be right, but you did hit another nail dead on the head there as far as prophecies. There is something I'm sure you all know in high school and in college, dealing with Oedipus and the whole Oedipus Rex. The story is a prophecy that he was destined to murder his father and marry his mother. That is a Chekhov. Even though it's verbal, it's a concept essentially. It's still very much a Chekhov's gun. It's an example of something prophecy that's meant to come to pass, and it does. It pays off big in the end. So you could argue that type of stuff, prophecies, are Chekhov's guns. If they've been established by someone cursing somebody with this or informing them of this or what have you, I would argue those are Chekhov's guns.
Right. Even if it's something similar like Star Wars, where it doesn't happen in the sense that you would think with like Anakin bringing balance to the Force. He did, but just not in the way that people thought it would happen.
Yeah, if it's with Star Wars in particular, let's say that you are like in the modern, if you're a person down, a kid who hasn't seen any Star Wars, if you watch them chronologically, you could say that prophecy mentioned by, was it Qui-Gon first? I think it was Qui-Gon that said it, right? He
found it in was either a fortune teller or he found it inside of one of the holocrons. But he was the first one to discover it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. You could say that is a Chekhov's gun there. That Anakin will bring balance to the Force, and it's paid off. Maybe in episode 6. I said, well,
3.
I'm not sure.
Revenge of the Sith.
Well, because he all the Jedi basically. It's kind of so. You could say that that's actually a Chekhov's gun, is the holocron telling Qui-Gon's the prophecy that Qui-Gon receives. Yeah, that could work. I would say with Game of Thrones, going back to that real quick, there's a part where you almost set up Jon Snow to be the one foretold to take down the Night King. That doesn't happen, but then Arya has, spoilers for this, she has that dagger which has the type of blade that's meant to be able to kill a White Walker, right? That blade that she has essentially is a Chekhov's gun. Her having it, you're waiting to see it used to capacity, and then it's used like that to take down the Night King. So it's kind of it is a smoking Chekhov's gun, so to speak.
So that being said, do you have to like verbally? Because I don't remember them actually verbally saying that Jon Snow was the one that would defeat the Night King. I thought just because he was the main male protagonist and they were hyper leader, people just assumed he'd be the one to do it. Yeah.
It was not verbally ordained at all. Nothing like that. I mean, and that's the thing. Usually these smoking guns aren't, these Chekhov's guns aren't actually highlighted that much. They're not supposed to be said like, hey, this is important. Pay attention to this thing, or this is going to happen like this. It doesn't work that way.
All right. No. Well, guys, do you guys have any other remaining thoughts on Chekhov's guns before we close out?
How do you spell it?
Good point. So
I'm assuming like Czech, like the country, like the Czech Republic.
I believe so. What's funny is I think it's actually Russian, but it's spelled Chekov.
Chekhov. Really? That's weird.
I believe it's spelled the same way that in for Star Trek fans, the character Chekhov, he spells his name ironically enough.
It seems very American.
Chekhov.
Yeah, like the way the spelling of it. I assume to be like they'd be like spelled like the Czech Republic.
No, I mean, because I think the origin. Let me look at the origin for this too.
Like I feel like if you asked any like American randomly, like how do you spell Chekhov's gun, that'd be like actual like the word Czech, and off would be like the way they'd spell it.
Yeah, they might be. Wait, I'm not sure. So it's Chekhov. Chekhov. I know it doesn't say if it's Russian or let's see.
I feel like they originally meant it to be like check off, like a list, I guess.
Check off a list.
Yeah,
But
then it just got mistranslated or miscued over time.
Well, the way it originally came about was that it was actually in a play where there were two guys having a conversation and there was a gun literally sitting there on the table. So it was a literal thing where there was a character at Chekhov's apartment, Chekhov's house. This was his gun sitting there, which is why it came about because of that specifically.
Interesting.
But I can't remember if it was a Russian play or if it was a German play, what kind of play it was that came about. But anyways,
fair enough. Well, guys, this has been another point of interest video. These are just where we get into narrative points, topics. So if you guys have any ideas for anything you want to be spoken on next, let us know in the comments below. Please subscribe with the little noti bell if you want to know when we drop content, the moment we drop it. We highly appreciate that. And this has been C Diesel, King of the Comics, and Lelouch Reed with another episode of the Then and Now podcast. We thank you for your support. We hope for your continued support, and we'll see you guys next time.